Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jessica Tenuta, and I'm Packback's co-founder and chief product officer, and I'll be acting as today's moderator for the session. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're going to be discussing instructor experiences using Packback in face-to-face and online classes. And as a part of that discussion, we're going to be talking about the use of Packback for flexibility in different disciplines and different class sizes as well. So today we are going to be covering just a couple of housekeeping tips before we jump into the content. So as folks are joining, if you have any questions throughout the session that you'd like to ask the panelists, please leave those in the attendee chat. You can find that on the left side of your screen. So please drop in any questions or comments, and we'll address those in the Q&A session at the end of today's content session. And then I want to introduce my teammate, Ariam Tesfaye. She is in our chat today. She'll be monitoring for those questions. If you have any technical troubles, feel free to leave those in the attendee chat as well, and Ariam will be there to help you. So today I'm joined by two wonderful panelists, so I'm really honored and excited to get to be able to have them share their experiences with our audience today. The first is Dr. Kathleen West. Dr. West is an assistant professor in the psychology department at Winthrop University and previously taught at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. Dr. West teaches courses on general psychology, developmental psychology, physiological psychology, brain and behavior, and more. And Dr. West actually began using Packback about 5 years ago, and she was one of our very first professors on the platform. The Packback Questions platform is only about 6 years old at this point, so she's really seen us since the beginning and has seen and helped to shape the evolution of the platform over that time. So welcome, Kat. We're really excited to have you here. And then my second panelist that we're joined by today is Dr. Carlos Olivo, who is the Academic Success Coordinator in the Chemistry Department at Colorado State University, as well as an assistant professor in the Chemistry Department. His classes range from introductory seminars all the way through honor seminars in general chemistry, organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, and analytical chemistry. And Dr. Olivo began using Packback during the COVID-19 period to help support engagement in his seminar courses. So welcome to you both. We're so happy to have you both here. And as an introduction for the audience, Dr. West, if you want to start, and then Carlos will move over to you as well, just sharing a little bit more about your introduction, anything you'd like the audience to know about you. And one thing I would love to have you both share is just what your experience is like coming to Packback initially. What made you think about adding this new component to your courses?
Great, thank you. So first of all, thanks for letting me co-present today. I always appreciate any chance to share my teaching experiences, additionally working with Packback. So originally I was looking for a tool, again, about 4 or 5 years ago. I just wasn't satisfied with the discussion tools that were built into the learning management system. And I've used several different learning management systems. I've used Blackboard and Canvas and Moodle and several of them, and just they're clunky, they're really hard to grade, they're really hard to give feedback, especially on an individual level to students. And I just wasn't pleased. And so I was sort of hunting around for a tool, and I stumbled upon this little tiny startup company called Packback. And they pitched me a good pitch, and I was like, I'm gonna give it a shot. I like some of their features that they're offering. I like that I'm going to be able to give students a little more individualized feedback, and I gave it a shot, and I haven't looked back. I'll tell you a little bit more about sort of my experiences later, but if I sort of had to quickly summarize why I keep using it, it's super simple for me, and it's really simple for the students, and they really do get stuff out of it, more than I could provide with at least any other tool that I've found to date. So that's why I keep coming back to it.
Thank you, Kat, and welcome again. We're so happy you're here. Dr. Olivo, do you want to just add a little bit to your introduction beyond what I shared and share the same story of kind of how you came to Packback originally?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jess, for the introduction. And I'm really happy and excited to co-present with Kat here, my colleague. And I came across Packback from an invitation from one of the support team members. And I think that I made the great decision in adding Packback to my teaching experience. I started using Packback in fall of 2020, during right in the middle of the public health crisis, and it was a great experience to incorporate something that would allow my students to participate more, to get deeper into the questions that we were addressing in the classroom. And because my classes in the fall were in the seminar format, I really wanted something that will help students that are not necessarily extrovert, or that they have difficulty expressing themselves or maybe voicing their opinions in the classroom, to have the space to actually share their ideas and thoughts about the course content. So I think that was the main purpose of using Packback, and it was a great experience using it, and I incorporated into my classes very well. And I think that they the students accepted the challenge of having to post something in Canvas in Packback every week. So I will share more later on, but my students appreciated the opportunity to have something to actually be able to communicate with their peers, even though they were having trouble with the coping with the pandemic and transitioning to virtual teaching.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carlos. And again, welcome. We're so happy that you're here today. I know we have a wide range of folks in our audience today, some people who are familiar with Packback, some people who may be new to Packback. So I wanted to just do a very, very quick explanation of what we are, just to give context for the additional questions that we're asking today. So Packback is an online discussion platform focused around inquiry. So the big difference in Packback versus other discussion platforms is that on Packback, the students are the ones asking their own questions. And the thing that makes Packback different is we have algorithms in place both while the students are writing to help coach them on their writing feedback and explain how to ask effective, open-ended questions that lead to great discussion. So the goal of this platform is helping students to take what they're learning in class and extend beyond it and take ownership over it. So we're happy to answer any questions about what Packback is or how it works, but Dr. Olivo and Dr. West are going to go into detail about what their experience has been and how they both use the platform in their classrooms, because spoilers, it is very different in both of their classes, very different experiences, different sizes, different methodologies, different delivery mechanisms, and they're both doing amazing things with the program to help achieve goals in their class. So they're better to answer questions than I am, but I hope that's a helpful introduction to what Packback is. So we're going to start first by talking about the differences in Packback on face-to-face classes and online classes. Dr. Olivo, I know you joined us first during the pandemic in an online setting and are planning to use Packback in face-to-face classes in the future. And Dr. West, you've had the exact opposite experience, starting with Packback primarily in face-to-face classes and then kept using during the pandemic. So what do you both see as the role of Packback in face-to-face versus online courses? Do you see it as the same? Does it play the same function in your class? Or do you see different benefits in those two types of delivery mechanisms? And Dr. West, do you want to start?
Sure, thanks. Yes and no. So for me, I have some similar goals that I do with both formats. And because again, prior to the pandemic, I have taught classes that were face-to-face and I have taught classes that were online. And I wanted Packback as a tool for both of those sections. For example, I like to use Packback for what I call discipline-specific communication. So I'm teaching various types of psychology courses, and I want my students to learn not just how to memorize various facts or memorize definitions or things like that, but then how to actually explain to somebody else what they know, or how to connect it with something that they've read in the news or heard about on a podcast or saw in a movie or something like that. So what we use Packback for is doing some of those things, making those connections between what they've heard in my class and what they've heard out in, sort of like the real world, if you will. And so one of the things that Packback can do is to kind of force them, right, to learn how to speak about what we've been talking about and to help it to make sense, to help them to not only ask the questions, but then respond to other individuals' questions and make an argument, or to just add to a conversation in a way that is logical, a way that makes sense, supporting their points, that sort of thing. And again, that is an important skill, whether you're face-to-face or online. And so that skill is something I want both of my sections to get. Now, how I get there may be a slightly different trick on my end, right? But I'm going to have both sections be able to do that. So again, some things I'm going to use the same. Some things that are different. For example, in my online classes, we don't get to see each other. We don't get to know each other as much. So I use Packback a lot more in my online classes to build a sense of community. We do get to know each other a little bit better because we get to discuss things and we get to talk and we get to share, even if it's still more content related, more class related than we would otherwise. So that's definitely going to be a lot more important in an online class than in a face-to-face class, where we do get to have a little more camaraderie and things happening in the actual classroom space. So again, there are some things that are dissimilar and some things that are different, but overall, it is a very important tool that I use in any class, no matter what I'm doing. Now, oh my gosh, it was a full year ago. Oh, time has been both flying by and crawling by. It's been the weirdest experience. I don't know if any of the rest of you have had a similar experience to that, but when we had to transition in the middle of a semester to everything going online, one of the things that my students really appreciated is that at least one of the pieces of their curriculum stayed the same, right? So my face-to-face students said that even though all of a sudden, like, they had to transition from coming to class every day to now having lectures online, at least Packback stayed the same. And that piece, they didn't have to switch. It was just one thing in their life that just felt a little smoother, felt a little easier. They also felt like it was a place that they could sort of kind of rely on, that they could kind of use to check back in, things like that. So they just felt like it was sort of a safe space. I like that they use the word safe space a lot for Packback, to bounce ideas off of, to try things out, to make sure they understood stuff. So that was really important to me, especially when, it felt like everything around us was sort of going nuts, that there was at least this one tool that didn't feel too complicated, too crazy, too confusing for them.
That's really wonderful to hear. And yeah, it's really exciting that was one piece of stability in such an unstable year for your students. And Carlos, I know you had a similar experience coming to Packback that a lot of instructors have had this year, where you were initially seeking out something to help keep students connected when they suddenly all went remote and were trying to maintain that sense of community and connection. One thing I would love to have you share your perspective on is, having initially used Packback as sort of a replacement for face-to-face interaction, what's making you feel like you want to keep Packback in your face-to-face classes now moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I started using Packback in the online teaching delivery method, and I thought about it because I know that in the virtual teaching environment, it is very difficult to keep all of the students engaged, and we don't have that space for constant communication outside of a classroom. Another piece that is added to my teaching methodology is that I expect the students to do a little bit of research when they are putting together the response to their questions in Packback. So Packback allows for that flexibility, so that students have time to search the literature, come up with a couple of sources, and then cite those sources as they respond to the main question, and then respond to their peers within the discussion board. And that is something that, because the AI that Packback uses allows for that checking of the verifiable data that they are using, it is way better than having them to post everything in a learning management system, and for the instructor or even the TA to go through all of the posts if you have a big classroom, a big section, and try to figure out if that's correctly used, or if that's something that is correctly cited, or there are no tips. There's no opportunity for tips in terms of how to post and how to write. So for me, it was really important in that aspect. And the other aspect was, of course, the engagement, and also giving the opportunity for students who are not super engaged or not super, they may be shy, they may be hesitant to answer questions in the in-classroom discussion, to have that space for them, as Kat was sharing, the safe space for them to voice their thoughts and contribute to the discussion overall. One of the benefits of Packback is that allows students who may not be, eager to participate in the in-classroom discussion to post, at their own time, at their own pace, with all of those flexibilities, and also to enrich the discussion, while they are, proving themselves that they can do it, that they can answer difficult questions. So that's the plan for this upcoming fall, where we are transitioning back to in-person, to keep that Packback discussion incorporated into my seminars and to allow students to have that opportunity to do further research on the topics that we're discussing in the classroom, and to present their ideas in a way that they can see connections between the material and the outside world, especially in the disciplines that we are teaching. In my case, I teach the sciences, so I think that the application is really important for them, and also seeing different ways of, solving problems in real world scenarios.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Do you both have any thoughts around the amount or type of discussion that you see happening in a tool like Packback versus what was possible in face-to-face classes? Do you see any changes in what students are able to explore synchronously versus asynchronously?
I'll go first. So I found a different, I don't know about synchronous versus asynchronously, because when I think that, I think both online teaching modalities, but in person versus online. What I have found here is that this helps with the ability to have more people contribute to the same discussion. So when you're in a big classroom, especially when I was teaching classes at my former university where I had 250, 350, in one of those big, huge auditoriums, you just can't do a class discussion with that size. Or if you do and you had them have a discussion with a neighbor, there's no way that I can monitor what's happening. So, I can't correct. I just have to hope that they're talking about the topic and hope that they're saying things that are on topic, right? So at least this way, I can sort of watch what's happening, and I can make sure that what they're doing is productive, what they're doing is helpful, and they can actually feel like they're contributing to the class. So there's a lot more ownership here that I would be able to manage in such a large class. Now, in a smaller class, you don't have some of those big issues, but it still can be really beneficial to still having them do some things outside of class and then bring something to class and say, hey, let's go deeper into this. Or I saw that you guys were talking about this online. Let's go and let's do this more. Let's talk about this more. Let's go in this direction. So you can use what they're doing. It doesn't have to just be they do that there and we do this here. You can sort of make it a back and forth activity. And that was one of the things that I was going to sort of follow behind Carlos on. I actually use this not just for that, but also in terms of it also sort of gives me a snapshot for my online classes about what they're not getting. So in my face-to-face classes, they can interrupt me in the middle of a lecture and go, I didn't get that. Can you repeat that? Or I don't understand, right? In an online class, especially because the way I run my online classes are pre-recorded lectures. It's not a live lecture, right? And I encourage them to send me questions. I encourage them to email me. I use something called GroupMe. They can send me questions like that, but they just don't. So at least Packback gives me a way to see if they're confused about something. Because if I'm reading a post where a bunch of people have commented and you can see them going, I don't think that's it. On page 16, it said such and such and such and such. I can then go, okay, they didn't quite get it. So I can either make another quick little video to send out to the class, or I can send an email and go, okay, I saw you guys discussing this in Packback. I just want to make sure you get it. So it gives me a way to check in on my online classes that I just wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to, going off of what Kat said, like in terms of the synchronous versus the asynchronous components of the class, I think that the amazing part of Packback is that you can have that two-way communication and discussion about different topics, because what happened to me in my seminars, they were synchronous. So we had a meeting time, although we were online, and students were able to talk about their Packback discussions in the synchronous meetings. So they brought the topics that were commented on the Packback discussion into the classroom. And another piece that is really nice about Packback is that if you ask them to present either a counter argument or a supportive argument, they have to do some work in figuring out how in-depth they want to go, and also how they want to present their disagreements. Okay. They disagree with their peers, but in a professional way. So they start to develop that skill of writing professionally, and also to present topics, right, from different perspectives. and also use the literature to support their arguments. Even though they are disagreeing with somebody else, they are able to, connect with the literature and do that somewhat exploration of the topic to bring it up to the discussion.
That's so cool. And to do that, they're using the counterpoint and supporting point feature on Packback?
Correct, yeah.
Very cool. I want to take some of the things you just both mentioned around the differences in course size too that you've seen and transition us to talking about those I'm out of order here, but I'm going to skip ahead to class size because you both mentioned a few things there that were really, really relevant to the differences that you've seen. So very similar to what I mentioned of how you both have had different experiences with how you came to Packback in face-to-face versus online. You both have had hugely different experiences in the size of class that you've taught on Packback too. Kat, I know you've taught big and small classes on Packback. I know, Carlos, you've taught honors seminars where you're dealing with very high-level students, usually smaller classes. Can you both explore this a little bit with me around how you've been able to use Packback to manage different size classes and the differences that you've observed? So what have you seen in terms of how Packback behaves differently depending on class size, and how have you managed, especially in those very large classes? And Kat, I don't know if you want to start again because you've seen the small and the big, and then we'll move over to Carlos's experience as well.
Sure. So again, I teach a lot more, I guess more like freshman, sophomore type classes. So I teach a lot of like intro psych or some of the other, again, more freshman, sophomore type classes. And those are the ones that, again, tend to be huge. They tend to be 250, 350 type classes. And so it is hard to manage more interactive type activities in those classes. So that is why I really like having a tool like Packback to allow them to have some sort of activity where they can engage each other. They can bring something to the table. They can ask questions. They can respond, those sorts of things. So basically what happens behind the scenes and what I actually request when I'm having Packback set up a course for me is I have them pre-divide some of those really large courses into smaller subsections. Now the students don't know that that's happened, but when the students log on, they're really only being exposed to about 25 to 30 students at a time, which is a lot more manageable because every single week I'm having students log on in those lower level classes and ask one question and respond to two other classmates. So that way, when they log on, they're not seeing 250 or 350 new questions that they would have to sort through and go, oh my goodness, what is this, right? It's just not as overwhelming to the student. And again, they don't know that that's happened. So for them, it just sort of feels like there's just a couple questions there to answer. But they get sort of used to those same sort of people, even if they don't cognitively realize, hey, this is the same people every single week. But they seem to have a really good experience. Again, they log on, they have these small groups, they answer their questions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What's also really nice though, with I have these big groups is if I find something that's really good and I want to give a shout out, I just bring it up at the beginning of class. Again, even if I'm in an auditorium and I go, hey, where is student A? And somewhere, in the midst of that auditorium, student A will raise their hand and I go, student A, kudos. This is amazing. Let's talk about what student A did that was so good here. And so I can teach some of those lower level basic things that we want students to learn. Student A backed up their ideas with a source. Look at what they did here. So this week, what I want everybody to do is to back up their ideas with a source. So again, that's something that may not always be intuitive to them, but it's a skill we want them to learn. I can teach them how to do this in a very simple way just by giving kudos to a student. And then what you'll see, because everybody wants to get a kudos, they're all going to flurry that next week and try to link it to a source. So it's, again, super simple, right? But again, it's almost, and again, I'm a psychologist, so sorry I use these words, but I'm just using positive reinforcement to get them to learn something that I want them to learn, and it works very effectively. On the opposite end of the spectrum, I've also taught a really tiny 16-person senior seminar. So these guys already had the skills. These guys know how to communicate. They know how to back up their ideas. And in that case, we got to have a lot more fun, right? We got to go deeper into issues. We got to do a lot of the stuff that Carlos was talking about. So I won't go on too long here. I'll let him sort of jump into it. But we got to have those deeper discussions. We got to really argue both sides of an issue. We got to take a psychological phenomenon that there isn't a known answer and say, what about this? What about this? What about this? And so that was a lot more fun. So again, there's a lot you can do with the exact same tool. But what's nice is that it meets the student at their level, and you can have them do whatever it is that they need and that they're able to do.
Carlos, what was your experience with teaching the honor seminar on Packback?
Yeah, so for me, it was a little bit different, but in other ways, it was similar to Kat's experience. So I teach 2 honors seminars and 1 introductory seminar in chemistry that has a large enrollment. And what I did was to incorporate learning assistants to my classes. And these are undergraduate students, upperclassmates that are advanced in their courses, and also they've had some kind of experience teaching students. Some of them are majoring in chemical education or want to become teachers in the long run. So having this experience will help them to create that empathy with the students and also practice some teaching skills. So I included them in the Packback discussions so that they were able to do a couple of things. One was to acknowledge the participation in the discussion board. So sometimes they posted something like, "Oh, I found this other source to answer this question," or "I found out that this problem can be solved in a different way." Or they posted a question related to the final exam. And they wanted some feedback about how to tackle that problem. So the learning assistants were able to answer their questions or even interact with them in a way that serving like more, providing more guidance in terms of how to solve problems and also how to approach the literature to support their ideas within the discussion. Another responsibility of the learning assistants was to also answer questions or refer students to me personally if they were, expressing some concern about any area of the content or any material that was very difficult. And the other piece was to also, stay engaged with them, just saying, "Oh, I found your response to this fantastic. Why don't you look at it a different way? And why don't you find out what's the consequence of this? Or look at from the ethical perspective," incorporating those things. So we had meetings every week to kind of go over the things that were going on in the Packback discussion to make sure that everybody was acknowledged and that all the questions at least were read and that they received some kind of feedback, either from the AI or from the learning assistant or from the instructor. The other thing is that learning assistants were able to, to communicate more. They were more engaged in the Packback discussion because they had the flexibility of responding to peers over the weekends. And that provided that opportunity for them to bring up some other topics that were talked, offline, like in the discussion boards, but are not brought up in the classroom. And that, I think, enriched the discussion in the classroom whenever the learning assistants were able to bring to the classroom those things. So I think that that's one way to address the issue of large classes. If you have the opportunity of having a TA or a learning assistant at the undergraduate level to just monitor the discussions, they don't have to grade them, but at least they are in contact with the students in a different way. And that, establishes some connection between the course content and the students, which is the main thing about it. So for the small classes, the expectations were higher, and because they were honor students, I was constantly encouraging them to participate and to look up the counter arguments that their peers were posting in their submissions, and reply back with a response, or even to provide some stars, because I know that Packback allows you to feature certain posts. And then the fact that they receive a weekly newsletter with the posts that were highlighted throughout the week, that motivates those that have been, working behind or are not so interested in, participating in a more active way. That encouraged them to go to Packback, see what's going on, see the topics that are being discussed, and also participate. So I think that the platform creates that opportunity as well for multiple interactions, student versus instructor, student with learning or teaching assistants, and student among students.
Awesome. And we got a question from Patrick in the chat. Were your learning assistants volunteers, or were they assigned to your class to support?
That is a great question. So my learning assistants were students who are pursuing the teaching career. So they are either biology, chemistry, or physics education students. And they volunteered, so they are recruited. Okay, I sent out the announcement saying I'm recruiting students who would like to, learn more about teaching methodology and would like to support my course in this and this and this way, and they receive credits. So they receive from 1 to 3 credits, depending on the number of hours that they, that they work with the course at a 300 level. So that helps them to get credit for their advanced science electives.
Awesome. And I've seen some interesting things that instructors who don't have assigned TAs or learning assistants do in a large class, where they may actually take volunteers. Patrick, to address your question too, some instructors are taking pure volunteers for their classes to act in sort of that mentor role and look to give feedback to their peers. And they'll sometimes give extra credit or additional points in some way for that volunteer work, which we've seen work really well, even if the students aren't assigned as a TA. You both mentioned something really interesting that for someone who might be new to Packback may not know about. You both mentioned not needing to grade every post in the discussion and not needing your TAs to look at every post in the discussion, but instead giving feedback and engaging. Why don't they need to grade every post in the discussion manually?
I'll start again because I want to reassure all of you that are listening that don't have TAs, because I don't, that you can use Packback even if you don't have TAs. Now, if you do, there are some great and cool and amazing things that you can do with them, and all it does is enhance what you can do. But don't panic and turn us off and be like, oh, well, I'm done because I don't have TAs. No, it's totally doable. And even when I taught the 350 students, I didn't have TAs there either. So you're good. I have a couple tricks that I use. My favorite that I do, and I don't even know if I told Carlos this yet, but my favorite trick that I do every single semester for sort of policing the platform is I offer a continuous extra credit assignment. I say, if you find anything that is on Packback that is incorrect, that hasn't already been corrected within the discussion, so if you find some sort of false information or just incorrect statement that hasn't been fixed, you can take a screenshot of it and send me an email and tell me why it's wrong. Like, tell me what's incorrect about it. And if it's right, if you were correct, right, and you have found something that's not right, I will give you 1 point of extra credit, right? So basically, I am asking my class to police the platform for me. The most extra credit I ever had to give out, I broke my record a couple semesters ago. I gave out 6 extra credit points, right? Once they send me the email telling me that it's wrong, I say, yep, absolutely, I'll give you your extra credit point. Will you please now go back into Packback and reply to the post and fix it for me? And of course, they're like, yeah, extra credit, sure, yeah, I'll go back in there and I'll type it, and it's no big deal at all, right? So again, that's method number 1, super simple, especially in those really large classes. And again, there's always extra credit. So at the end of the semester, when they're asking, just say, hey, there's been extra credit, go for it. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and again, this is really where my discipline comes in, but obviously you don't have to be a psychologist to use these tricks, right? The idea of positive reinforcement is really, really important. So picking the things that students have done well and highlighting those either through Packback itself or in your class is going to go a long way. And again, I'm going to be perfectly frank here. I give them, somebody's asking in the chat, I give them 1 point of extra credit if they find an error. So again, I guess supposedly if somebody found, again, my classes were 700 points. If they find 700 errors, I suppose they could get an A for Packback errors. But honestly, there's not that much ever wrong. That's the thing, because students are engaged in a conversation. They're self-correcting in the conversation. That's just the nature of how it goes. So as I said, and you could adjust that. I mean, you could give a half point, whatever you wanted. But the idea is they work really hard for extra credit. I don't know why. That I don't think psychology has ever explained. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So if you find something good that students are doing, whatever it is, just tell them about it. Again, give somebody a kudos, right? Student A, this was great. Let's talk about what they did. Do you see how they linked what we talked about in chapter 6 with chapter 8? Good job making those connections. Do you see how they connected what we heard about in the news or in this current event with what we talked about in chapter 4? Do you see how they backed up what they said? Do you see how this is a peer-reviewed article? Let's talk about the difference between peer-reviewed articles and news articles. So you can use some of the stuff that they're doing as teaching moments and do that reinforcement. And again, they're going to immediately go back into Packback either that night or the next day and try to do that thing that you said. So, and all it takes is 1 or 2 a week. I tend to, because I meet with my students twice a week. We're on a Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday schedule. And I just give usually at least one person a shout out every single day. That's sort of how I start class, is just with my kudos from Packback shout out. And sometimes it's just, this was a good question. Sometimes I also start out with questions that were good, but that nobody answered because they were not brave enough to answer it. And I'll go, let's take 2 minutes right now and let's just answer it. And for all of those things, I'm not giving any points for those. Those are just a general shout out, good job. So I'm not giving any points for that. It's just, here's what we did. I keep seeing a couple things over here. So do the extra credit after the discussion. I have, in my grade book, I just have an extra credit column that I just kind of continuously monitor throughout the semester because I grade on points and not percentage.
There's actually two similar questions in the chat that I think would be great to address in the class size section here, from Doreen, or excuse me, from Denise and from Michael, speaking about the volume of posts and Packbacks, and students are asking their own questions, starting new discussion threads, that it can get very overwhelming in bigger classes, especially if the instructor is trying to respond to every student question. What would you both share as either advice or your experiences on that front? And maybe Carlos, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I can answer that. And one of the things that, to piggyback on what Kat said about giving kudos to whoever posts something that is really interesting and connects with the material that we're discussing, and also to acknowledge the fact that they have gone the extra effort, okay, and the extra mile to post something that is valuable and that is worth mentioning, right? The other thing is that you have two, I guess that you have two ways of grading the Packback discussions. One is based on curiosity points, and the other one is on participation. So if you ask them to participate 2 times per week, they will just post the minimum, okay? They will just go for the minimum and they will post twice a week and that's it. But if you encourage them to post the best posts, okay, that they can ever come up with, and also to use citations, to use other resources, to encourage them in presenting counter arguments or evidence to disagree or agree with their peers, then that engages the students more and also provides the opportunity for them to, take some time and also, work harder with those posts. And then the curiosity points is based on the way they participate, the way they engage, the length of their posts, and that's something also that you can consider in terms of giving extra credit. So if everyone goes, over a certain amount of curiosity points, they will receive a certain percent of extra points or whatever. And then the other piece to address the issue of not having to read all of the posts is having those, students that are probably more advanced in the class to monitor the chat or monitor the discussion and also reply to their peers. So you can actually encourage them to reply to their peers whenever your peers have questions, okay? So that your peers will not feel lost in that discussion. And at the same time, you don't have to address every single question that comes up in the discussion. For instance, I read something about a math class. There are, probably 2, 3, 4 different ways to solve a math problem in calculus. So you can encourage students to present their ideas on, okay, this derivative is solved this way, but maybe there's another way, or maybe there's a substitution that you can do, or maybe an approximation, or maybe you can neglect X, whatever that, issue is, right? With the problem, you can encourage the students to pose the variations of that solution. And that answers probably many students' questions within the Packback discussion. So you don't have to read every single post or answer it to every single student in that sense.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. And I think this is a great transition too. And Kat, if you, in this response, if you want to try to address both Denise's question and Michael's question too, what are some of your implementation methodologies that you use each week to help keep the amount of time that you have to spend on Packback manageable each week? What tools do you use? What consistent things do you do each week? And Kat, if you want to start off.
And again, I'm mostly going to speak about when I am working with those lower level freshman, sophomore classes, because that's primarily what I'm doing. And again, it doesn't matter what size. So I can be working with, currently at my current school, I have 25 person classes, which are great, or those 350 people classes. So whatever it is that I have, I sort of have a pattern that I follow. So the student expectation is that they go on to Packback each week and they ask one new question related to whatever we have been discussing that week, and they respond to 2 posts. And what we do throughout the semester, even though it's not stated, I'm just kind of working with them behind the scenes, is that we add a little bit more expertise to it as we go throughout the semester. So I'm encouraging them to add length. I'm encouraging them to add argument. I'm encouraging them to add sources. But again, just the basic expectation is ask one question, respond to 2 questions every single week. So my job on Monday morning, because their deadline is Sunday night, and I picked that just because for me, Monday morning is usually the calmest morning. So I log on in the morning, grading. I grade is an all or nothing. Either they did it or they didn't do it. So I go and I look for it, quickly put it in the grade book. That part doesn't take very much time at all. And then I sort in 3 ways. And this is the beauty of Packback that LMS just cannot do. I sort in 3 ways. The first way is just the first screen that comes up. I just look at the posts that are there because those are the ones that were done at about 11:58 p.m. the night before. So that was the stuff of the people that were just logging on, and those are the people that are probably my procrastinators. They probably need the most help if they're going to need help. Or it was people that were actively having a discussion that sort of went on and kind of until the last minute because they were all logged on at the same time because they had all waited to the last minute. So that's where you're going to find some interesting stuff, either people that are going to need a little bit of help, and you can send them through Packback. So I'm going to address Denise's question. I don't send private feedback through Blackboard or through Canvas or anything like that. I send it through Packback because you can click a button that says coaching, right? And it will send a private message, so only the student will see it, but they'll know exactly which post you're talking about. And then you can give them a sentence about what they can do to improve it right there in Packback. And so I'll tell them what they can do to improve it right there in Packback. Or that might be where I find something that a couple people are discussing, but I can tell they didn't quite get a concept. And so then I'm going to make myself a note. And when I go into class, either Monday afternoon or Tuesday morning, I'm going to go, okay, hey, I saw you guys were discussing X, Y, and Z on Packback. I'm not sure you quite got it. So let me make sure you understand it. Let's talk about it one more time. And I'll go over that topic again. Okay, so that's the first way that I sort. The second way I sort is by questions that had the most responses. And it's literally a click of a button and it brings them all up. Because those are, again, the things that students found the most interesting or that they were just discussing a whole lot. So again, I get a quick snapshot of what students found interesting or what they were talking about a lot. Again, gives me a sense of what they want. If I have time, I might add something, a quick slide or 2 to my lecture, or just a quick tangent in my lecture about whatever it is they found interesting. Or again, it might help me catch something that they found confusing that I might need to go over. And then I sort one more time, again, click of a button, by questions that weren't answered at all. And those are going to be one of 2 things. Those are going to either be a couple more students that need some coaching, and it usually means that their question, we just didn't quite understand what they were asking. And so again, usually what I'm going to write in there is, can you try rewording this question and adding a little bit more detail so that we understand what you're asking? I give that feedback more than probably anything else. Or it's a question that was so good and so advanced, right, that nobody was brave enough to answer it. And in which case, I'm going to do just like I did before. I'm going to make myself a note of which student it was so that I can bring it up on Monday afternoon or Tuesday morning at the beginning of class and go, hey, student B, where are you? This is a great question. Let's talk about it. Mm-hmm. That whole process can take me, if I limit myself, and that's actually the hardest part, is limiting myself because I go down the rabbit hole. It can take me about 20 minutes, seriously, per section. So I teach 4 classes, which is a lot, but hour and a half or so, it's really not that bad considering I'm grading discussion posts to give all that feedback and to do all that stuff and whatever. So that's really not that big of a time investment. Now, does it take me longer than that? Yeah, usually. But again, that's just because I am doing more than I actually have to do, right? 20 minutes per class is probably more than enough. And again, you don't even have to do them all in that same morning. You could even spread them out if you needed to, and go from there.
Yeah, thank you, Kat. That was an awesome explanation, and thank you for going into detail about how you use the sorting features on Packback. Carlos, you mentioned the use of the featuring tool earlier. How do you show your students that you're reading everything and show or present in the discussion? How do you show them your presence and make sure that they know that you are there and you care, even if you can't respond to everybody?
I cannot respond to everybody, but I make sure that I skim over all of the posts. And also, I respond to a couple of them, the ones that I found more interesting, or maybe the ones that have a lot of red. So the way that I incorporate Packback into my my courses is that Packback has a it is a high percent. It is 20% of the grade. Okay, so they are expected to answer to my main question. So I post a question every Monday morning. They need to answer that question, and they need to post another question that relates to that question that I'm presenting, and then they need to respond to at least two other peers in the discussion. So they have a lot to do with Packback because they need to earn that 20% of their grades. And it's not about right or wrong. It's probably more about posting and getting, participate and getting engaged with the discussion. And to answer my colleague Doreen's question about when is a good time to have deadlines set up so that they actually post something before the due date on Sunday, and that other students can have the ability to respond to their questions. Probably have a midweek deadline of Wednesday to have at least one the answer to the main question and their personal question posted, and then the responses to other peers through the rest of the week until Sunday. So that way they have time to present their ideas and also do some research if they need to amend something from their post, or if they need to check or revise something to present the evidence or the counter argument or the supporting argument for their posts. Now, the other way is to for the implementation of it is to make sure that students feel comfortable posting from the content that they are discussing in the classroom, okay, that they can bring the content to life through the discussion board. The other thing is that I go through the ones that have a lot of red, because sometimes students post with some political or social perspective, and they receive a lot of counter arguments. So I stop by those that are receiving a lot of counter arguments to see what's going on, and maybe bring that discussion to the classroom and say, okay, it looks like there are some, various points about this issue. Let's talk about it. Let's try to address the situation and see if we can solve the problem and come up with a consensus. Okay. So that's another way to incorporate the discussions of Packback without having to read everything, but at least acknowledging that you are going through them. And as I said, just clicking on the feature mode to feature some of the posts that you find interesting from your students, giving kudos to them in the classroom. And another way is to encourage them to give it a try. I've had some students that found very hard to communicate or to interact in the classroom discussions, because I talk a lot and I want my students to also talk a lot and share their ideas. But Packback allowed them for that space. And I want to quickly share one of my students in the course survey. One of the quotes, and the student said sometimes it was hard to come up with responses or questions for Packback for each week, especially when the week was particularly stressful. But Packback was incredibly beneficial for me. It allowed me to feel comfortable to share my thoughts, which is something I sometimes struggle with, end of quote. So I think that allowing them that opportunity to use that to actually argue and create that tension in the discussion, which is great, okay, in the sciences. And I bet, of course, in psychology, we want that tension. We want that, in-depth discussion and seeing things from different perspectives and seeing the generational, opinions, right? Like some generations may have a different opinion than us about certain things. So Packback allows for that that in terms of the classroom discussion. So I think that the methodology is, whatever fits your course. It doesn't have to be 20%. It could be 15%. It could be 10%. But at least that they feel that it's something valuable and that it's something that you care about, that you are really serious about it. Okay. That you bring it up to the classroom, that you actually care about what they post, that you also acknowledge the contributions that they're doing to enriching the class with their posts.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carlos. And just for folks who are new to Packback, I want to share a little bit of info about what Carlos mentioned around using the featuring tool on Packback. So a featured post basically gets put into a highlighted tab on Packback, so students can see all the posts that you decided or your TAs featured were the best in the community that week. So it ends up being a highlight reel of positive examples. And they also get sent to the students each week in a weekly digest that Carlos mentioned as well. So they get to see those examples come to their inbox, and it acts as a kind of a gentle reminder for the students to post as well. And one tip I would share on featuring posts is you can also leave public praise feedback on those posts. So Kat mentioned our private coaching feature that goes just to the students, but we have a feature where you can add public praise and you can explain why the post was amazing or what you liked about it or what you want the students to model. And then that ends up influencing a lot more students in the class than just the one student who receives the feedback, because the whole class can see it on your highlight reel of featured posts. So that's something we've seen be very helpful to saving time each week and still having an influence on the whole class. So in our last couple minutes here, I wanted to wrap up with one final topic around the use of Packback across disciplines. You both are, again, in very different discipline areas. Carlos, you're in the hard sciences, in inorganic, organic chemistry, teaching very, very hard discussions around chemistry in the hard sciences. Kat, you're in psychology, teaching around development and around how people interact with one another and being able to have a lot of conversations that extend to real world examples. How do you both make Packback work in such different classes? And if we could also try to address Pam's question in your responses here around how do we get students to stay engaged with questioning throughout the semester and avoid question asking burnout? Would love to see us address that in here as well. Carlos, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, no problem. So in terms of the sciences, I know that many folks that teach in the STEM disciplines may be hesitant to have a discussion platform for their classes because you don't want to talk, you just want to solve problems, you want to do the math, you want to kind of, get into the equation and get the solution to the problem as soon as possible. And that's totally fine. But I found that in the sciences, there is also space for discussion and also to bring up some ideas to make science more applicable to different scenarios. We want our students, and especially when we teach service courses, that they are not necessarily going to be chemists, okay? We have students from all disciplines in those courses, but we want them to be able to see the application of the science that we're teaching into real world problems, okay, that they can use in their households, that they can use in their regular basis, right? So the discussion provides the opportunity for students to see problems in a different way. And also because we may see like the straightforward solution for the problem, they may not see it. So having a discussion and presenting different, providing different opportunities to present the solution for the same problem, it's beneficial for them. It gives you another way of learning the same material, and also to provide the space for self-tutoring and also, peer-to-peer mentorship, because some students may get it faster than others, and they will help them through their discussions and through their posts. Another thing is that, in terms of the discipline-based discussions, I think that Packback allows for you to encourage students to go beyond and to think outside of the box. Sometimes we teach very traditionally, and we adhere to a textbook, and we probably don't want to go outside of what the textbook is saying, but to bring some modern applications of the content. Packback is very useful for that purpose. You can ask the students in a different way. Instead of saying like, you need to post 2 questions this week, you can also say, this week we're going to use Packback in a different way, and we're going to do like a blog, and you're going to provide some solutions or maybe strategies to tackle a different problem. And you can assign different problems to different students, and they will present their ideas, and then other students will judge that. Another way to use Packback is creating some panels or maybe forums to for students to debate. Okay, so you present a question, and then students have to debate, okay, on that question that you posted, and that's another way to use Packback. And then you may have a group of students that are against the point, some students that are in favor of that point, and some students that are judging the way the ideas were presenting within the platform. And then that creates more opportunities for discussion and also participate in a different way, especially when you have a virtual environment and you don't have that chance of having a big debate in the classroom. You can also have that through Packback.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Yeah, that is really, really cool to hear those examples. And Kat, how do you avoid that question burnout? I've seen you use Packback across a wide range of classes in psychology. How do you address that question that Pam brought up?
Yeah, I'm gonna lead into Pam's, but I'm gonna start with I think Doreen's question about, do I drop any weeks? So even before the pandemic started, I always drop 1 week, only because, for example, sometimes students have trouble getting their materials the first week, or like spring break week, or there's usually just some reason why there's a weeks that students can't get on, and it makes it easier for me to not have to say, okay, this week you do have to do it, but that week you don't, and this week you do. And it's just easier to say every single week, no matter what, there's going to be a Packback assignment, right? And you can pick whenever it is. I don't care. You don't have to explain it to me. Just pick your week that you miss. So if your financial aid hasn't come in and you have to miss the first week, that can be the first week. Or if you don't want to post before you leave for spring break, that can be the week you miss. I don't care, whatever it is. This semester, I did actually go to 2, just for mental health's sake. That's just how it's been. So I am seeing a lot of what a lot of people are seeing. Students are just exhausted. I think we are too. So again, I don't think it's just you that's seeing that. And so now I'm going to adjust sort of what Pam was seeing. It's not just you, Pam. Students are just burned out. And I think that's where it's coming from. I really don't think it's just anything else other than that. And so they're just desperate. And so the easiest thing they can think of is I'll just post about the assignment. What I would tell you is, all I can tell you, I guess, is what I do in my classes. So first of all, address them directly in Packback. If they're posting something that you don't want them to post, for example, the homework assignment or something like that, directly address it in Packback. Give them the coaching. You can even have it what's called moderated, so it will delete it in Packback so that it can't be seen. Now, if you're concerned about that, other students have posted, it'll delete theirs. No, it won't. It'll still give students credit. That's the cool part about the AI that's behind the scenes or whatever. But you can, again, send them a private message too, and only that student will see it. So even the other students that had posted, they won't even know anything has changed in the universe, right? So again, definitely be sending them feedback through Packback itself, because then they'll know exactly what was the issue, what question was the issue. You can give them the 1-sentence statement about, just keep in mind, this is a not appropriate question. You want to be asking questions about this. But then I'm going to piggyback, because I did something very similar to what Carlos did. You can give them a week off from asking questions. And what I found helps is letting me ask the questions for a week. So I did that once this semester. There was some cool new research that came out. And so what I did is I said, okay, I'm going to give you guys a week off. I'm going to ask the questions this week. I'm going to post 2 separate questions. You guys need to answer both of my questions as your 2 for this week. I mean, if you want to ask one, you can. Right, but you don't have to this week, but you must answer my 2 and you must respond. And the way I ask questions is they have to pick a side based on the research and then defend it based on the research. So basically what they had to do is they had to read it, they had to pick their side and then sort of talk about it. And again, this is freshman level, and in one case it was sophomore level. So the expectation is still fairly low, but the skill building is what I was going for. And a lot of students said that was a nice sort of brain break, that they didn't have to think of something. And then the final suggestion that I have that I do a lot, especially if you do have students in class, is when they ask questions in class, all right, go, hold on, hold that thought. I'll answer it next class, but what I want you to do first is I want you to make yourself a note. make that your Packback question this week. Make yourself a note so you won't forget between now and when you get home, but go make that your Packback question for the week because that's really good. All right. So go ahead and post it and see if anybody answers it. And then if they don't, I'll answer it next class. And it's just a really good way, again, to get them inspired, to get them thinking, because again, they're thinking while you're talking. It's just sometimes it's hard for them to think outside of class. But again, I loved some of the other suggestions that Carlos had about bringing things into it. But yeah, just again, be flexible with the platform, be flexible with what you require. Again, especially when the world is as crazy as it is. And I don't know if your administration is like mine, but they've been changing things every 10 seconds. So yeah, that does take a hit on curiosity. We know that from the psychological literature. So yeah, just be flexible with them. And I promise your students will come back around. It's not that they don't like the tool, and it's not that they don't like your class. They're just burned out like the rest of us.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing both your practical ways of using Packback and your experiences overall today. There are so many great questions coming in. I wish we could even have this conversation go longer today. Thank you both again for your time today. And yeah, we're really, really excited for everyone who joined us. Thank you to all of our audience members who tuned in and listened. I hope this was helpful. Our goal really is to try to build a tool that is easy to use for the students and instructors and consistent regardless of the class that it's used in. So if there are any questions that we can answer that didn't get answered here, please feel free to send an email to me and I'll route it to the appropriate person. My email is jessica@packback.co. Really, really excited to meet with y'all. Thank you again so much for joining us. Carlos, Kat, thank you so much. This was really, really wonderful.
You're so welcome.
You.
Thanks all.
Have a great day.
Have a good day.